Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Crash, and this here is Doofy. How are you, Doofy?
Hi, my name is Doofy. I am doing.
You're
That is,
doing.
I'm,
You're
I'm doing a lot right
bugging.
now.
Yo, damn.
Whoa,
That's how you're
I'm doing a
doing.
whole lot right now. Yeah, that perfectly expresses my mood right now. But
um,
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing considerably well.
Okay, we like to
And
hear it.
yeah, and we're here to discuss criticism in manga specifically because my channel is for manga. But I think
Don't mind me. I'm just
it's,
fading into
it's just gonna
nothingness.
it's just gonna be bugging the whole stream. That's fine. Damn.
Boy, I swear it's not.
We just saved Doofy from Shadow Realm,
All right.
and we're
Hopefully, we will be able to avoid that in the future.
yeah,
But now with that taken care of,
yeah. So again, we are going to be discussing criticism on manga in specifically because again, channel is for manga. But I think what we're going to be talking about can apply to anime, can apply to movies, can apply to pretty much everything else. Um, and yeah, this is gonna be a little bit more of a podcast. So yeah, grab your beers, grab your snacks, and just listen to us. We'll be discussing for not sure how long. You're gonna be more sure than we are. Gonna ask people to check out your videos on subjectivity versus objectivity. You also have a very interesting video on popularity and how it reflects with equality. And I forgot your most recent video, but it's also relevant to our conversation.
it is. Yeah, it's on why you guys are ranking anime wrong.
Yeah, exactly,
A very
exactly.
provocative title.
So I think I recommend checking those videos out either before or after because I think we're gonna tackle some of those topics. I don't want you to just repeat what you said in the videos, so it's better for people to have a little bit of a background.
Mhm.
But yeah, and if you like us talking, you can also check our collabs also on your channel tier list on Seinen Manga, which is also very very fun.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, starting with I wanted to ask you if you think there's wrong criticism and so kind of if you think there's wrong opinions to have and if you think there's wrong ways to express opinion. So even if the opinion is quote unquote correct, if you think there's wrong ways to tackle those, that's kind of what I want to start with. Not sure which
Okay.
question you want to tackle first.
I definitely, I don't think that you can have a wrong opinion per se. I definitely think that whatever you think about a series is valid to the extent that, well, it's simply based on the series and it's something you somehow derived from it, even if you're adding in like your own presuppositions or values or references to other things. I still think as long as it has some vague basis on the anime or manga, it's
Yeah.
fine. By the way, um, I'm glad you clarified that this equally applies to anime because even though all my videos are so like just vague in general, I use anime as my go-to for examples, even though I think I'm probably thinking of manga the most.
Yeah.
But again, they're synonymous for the sake of this video, I think.
Yeah, I think it kind of applies to most, unless you're wanting to criticize the animation of a manga. It
Yeah,
it
yeah,
mostly
that
applies
would be
to
a wrong
everything.
opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah, to think that this manga is poorly animated. But interestingly, on a side note, I think that a lot of people actually have a wrong opinion about anime on that. They try to criticize animation, but they're criticizing the art style,
mm.
and those are two different things. But that could possibly be something we talk about later. But to get back to your original point, any kind of thing that you might want to think about an anime, I think is perfectly fine. It's the expression part that I think is a problem, and the main issue I see is I spent a lot of time on Twitter and TikTok, which has got to be like the lowest quality of discourse
Yeah,
around anime manga in the universe. So I'm neck deep in some absolute bullshit, and the biggest issue I find is when people say like this has good writing or bad writing, and I'm like, oh my goodness, okay, that is your criticism or your praise, but I don't think that those words strictly apply or suffice for kind of criticism simply because on their own they mean nothing. Like, what the fuck is good writing? What is bad writing? For
Yeah.
me, as I interpret it, good writing is like a name for like a set of criteria we have when we think about an anime or manga, and we need to kind of break those down to say anything meaningful. But good writing says absolutely nothing, because I think there's arguments for someone saying Bleach has good writing or bad writing, and like with that sentence alone, you're being told nothing about the series. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely issues with how you can express good or bad writing, or I mean your opinions.
Yeah, I think on topic of good and bad writing, I think for me, good writing essentially means that the story itself is coherent. So it doesn't have any clear plot holes. The story makes sense. Then it's well written, which to me doesn't necessarily mean it's a good story. So for example, I think Ghost in a Shell is well written, and I really don't like it anyways. The manga, never seen the anime. I've been told the anime is better. So just a side note. Um, on the other hand, there's like One Piece has certain plot holes that you can find. You need to nitpick a little bit, but if you want to nitpick, you can nitpick a couple of plot holes or things that don't really make sense. So, for example, I'm not sure where you were at One Piece.
Is at the end of our long.
Okay, so are you planning? The thing that I want to talk about spoils a thing that happens kind of like just right after, like 5-6 chapters from where you're
Oh,
on
that's
now.
fine.
So what happens is that a character is introduced, and you probably have seen this character. She's called Vivi, and she happens to be the princess of the next arc, which is the Alabasta arc. And she's introduced as a villain, and then she's a villain for like a small arc, which is 5-10 chapters. Then she's revealed that she's not a villain. The thing here is that when Oda introduced her as a villain, she wasn't expecting her to be the princess. So you can tell that her personality in the first couple of chapters that she's introduced doesn't really match with what happens next, which people may call a plot hole or contradiction or something that doesn't really make sense. And to me, that kind of happens because of the nature of the work. When you're writing one chapter a week, I think manga is always going to have things like that because the writers are going to change their minds. There's going to be retcons. There's retcons in Bleach. There's retcons in Naruto. That's kind of a natural thing to happen. I feel like for most people that would be something that is not good writing, that is bad writing.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that's an example of a thing that I most definitely wouldn't mind at all, and I don't, because I still have One Piece as my second best manga of all time. So yeah, that for me, that's just an example of how good writing may not mean anything, and bad writing can also not mean anything.
I think you bring up two really interesting points in there. For one, like initially you didn't say good writing, you said well written, and I think that's a really important distinction because I think when we say well written, we're just trying to say that a story meets some kind of standard of quality that doesn't necessarily reflect any values of our own or any particular community, but to just say like, listen, it's up to par with the standards of storytelling for an era. I think that's fine. But then good writing is like going an extra layer above that to say that not only does it meet this kind of level of quality, but like it does it exceedingly well on the basis of these things that I value. So I think there is a difference between well and good there. But even more than that, when you talk about plot holes, because I think generally people try to use good and bad writing to apply to a whole series. Where like One Piece is good written, or Naruto is poorly written. But I think the problem there is that I don't think you can just make a grand sweeping claim about that, about the whole narrative, because yeah, sure, there's points in Naruto or One Piece where there are apparent plot holes, and that is an instance of bad writing. But does that necessarily mean that the whole thing is poorly written? I don't think so. I think it has to be relative to the length of a manga. I think with something like One Piece, you're at 1,000+ chapters. Yeah, sure, a handful, a couple, even a few dozen plot holes are probably just okay. Because I mean, again, I think it should be proportionate. But for instance, if you had like a 3-volume manga series and that was just riddled with plot holes, I think that you could say then more reasonably is just bad writing.
Yeah. But actually, I think we talked a little bit about this on Discord or something. Sometimes plot holes can just be used for either comedic purposes or aesthetic purposes, or just be written on purpose,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which, all depends.
Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because I feel like my default way of trying to break down good writing, bad writing is by saying that there's like some set of criteria that we use under that heading. But I mean, realistically, I'm not sure if there's one set of universal criteria that works for every single series, because like you said, I think a plot holes in the context of a kind of serious battle shonen are more detrimental than in a comedic manga that is directed at getting laughs. I think that you can use bad things for good purposes and vice versa.
So, yeah, as an example, in music, I feel like there's, for every genre of music, there's different standards. But then there's something like, and I think that there's a version of this in anime and manga as well, but there's noise music and avant-garde music. And noise music, what it means is that it's trying to break the standards to create something that is completely different from what people normally are used to. So even if it's not always pleasant, which it isn't, it's a new experience, and you're listening to that music to get a new experience. And I feel like, there's avant-garde manga and avant-garde anime as well that kind of do this. They break the mold because it's actually interesting. It's actually nice to experience something that doesn't apply to that standards of quality that we generally have. And a lot of times, those manga, those anime, those wherever, especially I think in movies, that happens a lot, tends to be the most well-regarded ones. Sometimes.
Yeah,
If it's
yeah,
not
I
the most
definitely agree
popular.
with that. Yeah, because I mean, with any, yeah, like you said very well, like genres have their own kind of standards. When we look at manga, I mean, different genres have their own kind of formulas. The most obvious one being the battle shonen one that we all know and love.
Yeah.
And I mean, me and Archangel kind of talked about this in another video where, although it is kind of the same basic structure going, probably since all the way back to like Dragon Ball and Fist of the North Star, all the way up till the currently running battle shown like Jujutsu Kaisen. There's like a kind of similarity in the structure between all of these and like the different tropes they use and the different character archetypes. But I think the longevity of the formula isn't just because it's redoing things exactly the same way, but there are little differences that kind of go outside of it, and it's precisely those things that people like about the different series when they kind of go against different aspects of the basic formula, and that's when it gets regarded as good. For instance, like you've done a whole video on Chainsaw Man, for instance, that I think you demonstrate how it is embodying the basic principles of shonen while simultaneously doing something new with them, and that's why it's innovative, and that's why it's really groundbreaking.
Yeah, and Fujimoto does that a lot, even with Fire Punch, and even I think his one shots tend to be a little bit more classic, but he's someone that really gotten to be well known because he does things differently from most people. Even though there's a lot of people that probably are gonna read Chainsaw Man and gonna say that it's the same, but that's a completely different argument.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes me back to the wrong opinions. But no, I think that depends on the person that and their experiences as well, because some people may like, if Naruto is your first battle shonen, it's gonna do things differently. Or if it's your second, let's say, it's gonna do things differently from what you were expected from your first. And I've seen that especially when Demon Slayer came. I see a lot of people that just getting into anime, because I feel like we're getting a new wave of new people getting into anime with Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen. I've seen a lot of people saying that Demon Slayer were doing things differently, which I think it does some, or at least it does them well. But I've seen people like saying, like Inosuke is the most innovative character of all time. And I'm like, I love him. He's the best character in the show, but how much different is he from like a Kenpachi? It just it's kind of like tropes, which is fine. I don't think using tropes is necessarily wrong.
Right, absolutely.
I think
that's part of the appeal to a lot of battle shonen, right? We get these kind of familiar protagonists that they all do something slightly different, but you can kind of see the similarities. One that I always like to draw is between like Yusuke, Ichigo, and Itadori. Yeah, Yuji Itadori. That's a JJK.
Yeah.
Sorry, for a second I thought I was talking about MHA. For a second I got a little nervous that I made such a big blunder, but
no.
I mean, I very much think that they're all cut from the same cloth. They exhibit a lot of the same kind of personality traits, but they all have their own individual quirks that make them just a little different.
Yeah.
So I think leaning on that kind of familiarity in the beginning is good to just capture a broader audience, but then taking that audience with you as you develop that trope or that cliche or just that archetype generally into like a new direction. I think that's kind of, I mean, the bread and butter, the battle shonen genre.
Yeah, I think and Time Paradox Ghostwriter said this better, ironically. You have to do it in a way that embodies you, the writer, right? It needs to be unique to you in that way. And some people are gonna like the way that writer does things, and some aren't. I think one of the things that tends to be a problem when people are criticizing manga is that they tend to assume or talk as if their experience is above all the others, as if that book or manga or whatever was written specifically for them, and if it fails to appeal for them to them, then it has failed in general.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think coming to grips with the fact that the person's own experience is kind of like the baseline for how they compare to other series is important too when we think about anime criticism, because like you mentioned a little earlier, there are people whose first anime was Jujutsu, or not Jujutsu Kaisen, well probably, but Demon Slayer for instance, and that's going to be their baseline, and so every anime they see afterwards is going to be compared to Demon Slayer in some sense. I think that becomes problematic in some cases when you take one of these newer anime and you look back on the history of battle shonen, for instance. Like I always think to myself, like it must be difficult to start with like JJK and Demon Slayer, that if we're going to at least start with the anime, I imagine that those are probably more widely appealing to new audiences, but how like well produced they are, and I feel like they learned a lot from the, I guess, mistakes of past battle shonen. For instance, a lot of battle shonen in the 90s, like Rurouni Kenshin, Yu Yu Hakusho, start with like a series of really small kind of episodic kind of mini arcs just to introduce the characters and the powers. I really don't like that. Bleach does it too. It's awful. I mean, One Piece even does it too. It's I hate it. And then you get the good stuff. But I feel like a lot of the newer battle shonen kind of cut the fat on that, and they start with something a little larger, a little more structured. And so going from that back to say Yu Yu Hakusho, I think might be difficult for some of these newer fans, but also just how we've kind of complexified a lot of the basic archetypes present back then. So something like a battle tournament, like the Dark Tournament, might seem too simplistic relative to, say, like the Shibuya incident.
That reminds me of, it's a different genre, but Lavina, where some people, like, if you read Lavina now, it's very easy to just say, oh, it's just a very unoriginal ecchi manga, just like all the other tens of thousands that I've read before. But then you look at the dates, and it's like, yeah, those tens of thousands came out after Lavina, and most of them have been inspired by Lavina. Lavina did a lot of things for the first time. With, for example, that tsundere character. I'm not gonna say it's the first example, but it's one of the first most popular examples of the tsundere character in an Aram manga. And yeah, now someone's gonna read it and it's gonna be like, oh, it's tsundere. Of course it has a tsundere. But back then,
Yeah, exactly. I think the best way we can try and come out of our own kind of, I guess, bias with what we've watched and using that as the standard is to try and contextualize it historically. So, like, again, like understanding this came out in an earlier time and just trying to see how this might have been groundbreaking. I think is always one way to try and gain an appreciation for older titles. But a lot of people seem to have difficulty doing that. Like, people can look back on, I think in film, for instance, Star Wars. If you grew up with Star Wars, you probably love it because it was very innovative. But people who only get into it now and have this whole history of other sci-fi films to compare it to, they might see Star Wars as kind of cliche. So it's difficult for them to really appreciate what it was doing. And I think that applies for a lot of manga too.
Yeah, I think, for example, you were reading Devilman?
Yes, I'm reading Devilman.
How are you liking Devilman?
I actually really love it. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Because I like it. I like it decently enough because it's insane, and I like insane things. But it's a manga that I don't think has aged really that well.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that I feel like contrasting with most of the stuff that I read, especially because Devilman was one of the first, like, pre-90s, which is where I kind of cut things off. Like, pre-90s, it was one of the first pre-90s. It was very, I want to say, bare bones in terms of plot, art, things like that, compared to what we tend to have now. And I mean, Go Nagai is great. He's one of the most influential manga artists of all time for a reason. But yeah, a lot of the things that he wrote in the 60s and 70s, it's been like 40, 50 years. Or more.
Yeah.
My math's wrong, but yeah, more.
Yeah. I feel like there's something similar there with, like, Dragon Ball, for instance. I feel like a lot of people would say that it's more controversial because there's so much nostalgia surrounding the Dragon Ball franchise, and I think that kind of saves it from being the target of even more criticism than it is now. But I think the fact remains, if you just got into Battle Shonen with, like, JJK and you try to read Dragon Ball, it's going to be very difficult for you because I just Dragon Ball is simply a much more boiled down, bare bones Battle Shonen by contrast. Not to say it doesn't do things well, and understanding how it kind of brought together a lot of these tropes and archetypes for the first time, and how powerful and influential it was for that. It's valuable, and there's a lot to get out of it in that regard. But still, it's just going to be difficult if, like, your baseline is like Attack on Titan, Chainsaw Man, Jujutsu Kaisen, where the standard is much higher.
Yeah, and I feel like especially with the examples that you gave, or it's even difficult to swallow Dragon Ball, because Dragon Ball is something that I feel is a little bit more, I don't want to say kiddie, but it's a little bit more charming. I think Toriyama came from, gag manga, and you can tell that even in Dragon Ball Z. Of course, I've seen the Portuguese version of it, which is completely butchered with gags every sentence. So to me, it's mainly a comedy.
I love that.
But I haven't read them, or rather, I've read a little bit of the manga, but I never got to the Z part of Dragon Ball's there. So I don't know how it compares. But to me, I always feel like Toriyama's a bit of a childish, aura to it. Like, I don't mean childish as in a negative thing. I mean, like, it's very, like, I don't know how to say it.
Childish works. It does have a kind of kid-friendly energy about it, maybe.
Yeah. Same as One Piece, I feel. Even, One Piece.
Yeah.
One Piece has a lot of dark moments, but it's made so that children can still enjoy it. And I can tell that Oda really enjoys the fact that the kids love it, and I think Toriyama is the same in that regard. Yeah,
that was something both Laugh Now, Die Later, and I had remarked about One Piece in a video we did recently. Yeah. It just has a kind of cartoony feel about it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't, especially in those earlier moments, first 100 chapters, like, it doesn't seem to take itself too seriously, which is a pro and a con. I think it could be very problematic if you try to take yourself seriously and you're just, you have laughs and gags every second moment and this kind of comedic moments to break up the seriousness. I think that can be more detrimental. So the fact that it doesn't take itself seriously can be a pro in that sense, but I still I want it to take itself. I want it to be dark. I want it to be, you know what I mean? So that's why I want to give it a chance and get to those moments.
It gets
but generally, generally very cartoony.
Yeah, I feel like it gets darker in the backstories. So, for example, if you're on Arlong Park, the Nami's backstory and Sanji's backstory, I feel like they're pretty dark. And they just get darker from there on out.
Yeah. I loved Sanji's backstory. I thought that was awesome. The anime totally butchered it. They didn't include the part where he ate his fucking leg.
Yeah.
That was pretty badass, actually. That's when I was like, okay, there might be something in One Piece for me. It didn't capitalize on the darkness at that point, but I am motivated to go back and read more now.
Yeah. But I think it never truly goes there. There's all like Oda is always like putting a little bit of gags, a little bit of jokes in it. It's never 100% serious, with the exception of those backstories, because he really wants them to be like very, very emotional.
Okay.
Yeah. We went to a different point, so I don't know how to.
I was going to say we've derailed quite a bit.
Yeah.
I think it's all relevant, but
no. Another thing that I wanted to tackle is I just wanted to trash Twitter and how they they talk about criticisms, and I feel like Twitter. This is a thing that I was actually reserving for a video of mine on any Twitter, but might as well say it here. I feel like Twitter is a platform that isn't made for criticisms and reviews and things like that. I feel like it's made for quick sentences, memes. It's made to go viral, especially. I feel like it's the easiest platform to go viral, even though I haven't. Or someone stole it.
One banger.
Yeah, I did.
That one banger.
I did.
Not directly, unfortunately, but
yeah, someone stole it from me. But but it went a little bit viral. But that just showed that it's easier. Like someone with one follower by accident can go viral, and I feel like that makes people want to have those bangers. So Twitter is not about posting correct opinions. It's about posting something that everyone's going to talk about. And people are not going to be talking about things that are constructed, and it's like a big wall of text. And if you can post 3 pictures that someone can watch them in 3 seconds, that's easier for them to swallow and act angry or happy and share. And I feel like Twitter has influenced I'm gonna sound old, but the younger generation to
I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah, talk like that, because I feel like sounding old again. Back in my day, in my teen years, where we didn't have Twitter, where we all the discussions were in forums, it was way more encouraged for you to spend like even a fucking hour writing something, just post, and then the other guy would reply whenever. He could reply the next day, nobody cared. So yeah, I felt like we could write more, at least. Of course, there's always going to be people who aren't going to bother to write something as complex, but at least there were more people doing that. I feel like nowadays, Twitter, Discord, you just can't be bothered unless you have like a blog or a YouTube channel where you kind of have to write something that is like 10 minutes long. Then you're kind of forced to expand your own opinions. But I feel like that's kind of it. The people don't want to expand. It's not that they can't say something more coherent, say something longer, just that they don't want to. They're not encouraged to do so.
Yep, I agree. I also spent a lot of my youth in Naruto forums, and just the way that communication about anime happened was fundamentally different. Because like you said, for one, there's no limits in a forum. You can write as much as you want. And even though I'm a young, stupid kid, I was still trying to make points or point out specific things that I think were done well and use that. And the other major thing that you also point out is that it wasn't expected that there'd be an immediate response. It wasn't like an active, ongoing dialogue. It was like you make your point, and then you kind of move on, and you check it maybe the next day or something like that. There was less of a demand for that kind of immediate reaction. And I think that's exactly what Twitter capitalizes on, the fact that everything has to be short, concise, and reactions are very heated, very instantaneous. You know, you see something, oh, you can't believe you just said that JoJo's was better than Naruto. Rah, 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 rah. Yeah. Right? And then they're going to, again, see that kind of energy and mirror it, and then just kind of like devolves into just essentially screaming. And I do think that that has influenced how people think about anime because, for one, if their primary means of expressing their thoughts on it is either 150 characters on TikTok comment or 240 words on or characters on a Twitter post, their thoughts are essentially going to have to try and fit those limits, and so they think much more reductive about their animes. So that's where you get, it's not Naruto has good fights, great soundtrack, and Sasuke does this certain thing interestingly, therefore it's well written. It's Naruto is good writing. So
Yeah.
a lot of the kind of reasonings kind of get cut out for the sake of reducing it to a final judgment. Whereas on the forums, it's like you might not even know somebody's exact position on it until they've made several posts about what they thought was good and bad. So I think that's fundamentally very different. And similarly, we do have Discord, which I think is a healthier alternative because no limits, you can go longer. But there is still this kind of demand for like the immediate reaction, and I think a lot of these topics you just need to think more on. And I think expecting somebody to reply immediately becomes problematic for just, again, rushed thoughts, and those might not be entirely accurate, or you might not be able to express them the best so quickly.
Yeah, I feel like what you mentioned, we lose a lot of nuance on people's opinions of the things. Just an example of something that I did. I guess I did wrong, but I don't regret it. Was someone posting something about oh he was angry that Redwood was canceled and Roboco wasn't, and then I used that tweet to promote my video on Roboco. And then and then I think the tweet said something like that you needed to go to Shueisha or it's going to be violent or something like that. And then we started talking on my tweets, and after a little bit he actually said I don't even like dislike Roboco. I was like, okay, I don't know that. You said you're gonna punch someone because Roboco wasn't canceled. How am I supposed to know?
That like perfectly embodies Twitter. It's like we're taught to just give the most extreme form of our opinion for the likes, and it's not until way later that you get to the truth. Like how many like I'm guilty of this just as much as anyone else. Okay, I'm not above people with this, but I'll fucking tweet like Chimera arc fucking sucks. Just something really provocative. Like
Yeah.
again, I'm conditioned to reduce my take to as much as possible, give it the most extreme form, put it out there, with the hopes of course, getting viral essentially, and directing more traffic to my YouTube. So it's like, yeah, I'm a victim just as much as everyone else, but
me
I think it's
too.
problematic. That's why I tried to leave Twitter, but I'm so fucking addicted I can't.
Yeah, I feel like that's another thing is that I feel I've been more addicted to posting things, and I feel like I've been getting more angry more often because I'm someone who doesn't, for the most part, get angry. But when I see a lot of people, that's why I'm making this video, the way that they are talking about things, it just pisses me off.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's made to, right? It's
Yeah.
by design. We want to provoke the strongest emotions to encourage you to engage with it, right? And we exploit that passion to get more interactions, right? It's incredibly problematic.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is that people just, for the most part, just post whatever is. It's not really their true opinions. And again, I'm a victim of this, even though I most of the times do it jokingly. A lot of people can't tell. Is that whenever I'm talking about Jujutsu Kaisen on my Twitter, if you search Jujutsu Kaisen or JJK on my Twitter, it's always like just me trashing it for the most part. Unless I see someone like criticizing JJK on some grounds that I feel like are dumb, then I'm going to defend it. I've defended it, especially when Gege went on a break, that a lot of people were complaining. That I just can't win. No, it wasn't when he was on a break. It was the week before he went on a break that some of the pages that he posted on the magazine were incomplete because he didn't have time because he had a color page and he was sick, and some pages, and of course people who don't like JJK are gonna grab those pages that are incomplete and you'll be like, oh, this is your mangaka, mid work, whatever. It's kind of like, that's very dumb.
Yeah.
You're criticizing like someone's health essentially.
Yeah. Oh man. Like, and their vocabulary is limited to like, X is greater than Y, or X is mid, or X is overrated, X is underrated, um, or X is the GOAT. And like
Yeah,
that's it. That's literally like the
yeah.
five phrases they have
No,
at
they
hand.
they have trash or ass
Oh, true, true.
for the
And they
bottom.
right, they take these like five formulas and they swap around their like 10 anime and their 10 manga, and they just reconfigure them in different places in the formula, and then they get
Yeah,
a banger or not.
yeah, and they, of course, again, this is the way that you can get some reactions that you act like it's a fact.
Yes.
Like, Naruto is better than One Piece. People need to know this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm so like people always ask me why I care so much about the objective subjective thing. They think that it's just like me being pedantic, but it's not. There are actual implications to thinking evaluations objective. Because the moment you put out a tweet that says Naruto, well, I'll do this, or Demon Slayer just is bad, like you're presenting it as if it is simply the truth and you have to accept that, it totally kills any discourse, because when you think something is a fact that it's self-evident, you're not motivated to talk about it. You just take it on dogmatically and you move on. So if I say something counter, you're not going to listen to me. You're going to think I'm deluded and that I'm not seeing the truth. And then you say you're wrong. This is just how it is. Get over
Yeah.
yourself. And so that's why I'm so anal about this, because like this happens all the time. Naruto just is bad. One Piece just is bad. Naruto is just better than Bleach. I'm like, you you can't have discourse when people just think something is good or bad.
And I think that was a thing that people were saying on the comments of your subjectivity video, is that if subjectivity is if art is subjective, why should we discuss it? But it's exactly the opposite. If art is objective, why would we discuss it? People don't discuss if 2 + 2 is 4. I don't see people discussing that. I don't see people going
Exactly.
2 + 2 is 5.
Yeah, exactly. It's precisely because we can choose what criteria to pin it against, and we can try to say which one does it better by. We're more motivated to look deeper into the manga to find panels that would support my conclusion that it's better than another. Like we have to actually fight for it now, other than say, well, it's just there. So now we have motivation to discuss it. Otherwise, we don't. Like you said, yeah, it's
Yeah.
absolutely. I this is one of like the most smooth brain takes that I can simply not wrap my head around. Like I do not understand how you think that objective evaluation lends itself to more discourse. I think that's just so fucking wrong.
Yeah. I don't get it.
Yeah. But people want to hold on to it, man.
Yeah.
One other thing that I wanted to mention is how there's almost an inherent problem with having like a public platform surrounding anime manga, because ultimately to have any actual discourse, you need to have seen the anime that are being discussed, or you just need to know about them. And so Twitter is always going to be at the, at the limb. Is that the expression? At the limb of the popular series, which is fine. I have a whole video saying that I think there's this kind of attitude against popular series just because they're popular, but I kind of make a case that there's at least something there that is valuable. To some extent, we can kind of gauge how valuable. That's another issue entirely. Um, but it just makes discourse boring. It's like I said, it's the same 10 series, and you can only say JoJo's better than Naruto or Naruto's better than JoJo so many ways before it's like it gets played out. And that's the inherent issue with this kind of community around, or something so public. At least with like a private Discord, you all might have your little niche. Maybe you're a bunch of Tezuka readers or Sano readers, so we can talk more about that, and that's a little more unique relative to like Twitter discourse. But yeah, that's just another issue I guess I have with the whole deal.
One of the things that I did notice when I went to Twitter was just how much manga I thought was mainstream from my personal bubbles, because I didn't interact much with the community. I just interacted with a couple of discords and like personal friends.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of manga that I thought were actually mainstream, like Kaiji. I thought everyone watched Kaiji or read Kaiji. It turns out doesn't. They don't. Or Homunculus. I thought Homunculus was like one of the biggest. It kind of is. I feel like it still kind of is like kind of big, but it's not as big as I thought it was. At least compared to, other seinens, which is a topic that I'm going to be talking on a video that may actually be out when this one is out, on the seinen bias. But yeah.
I'm excited for that one.
Yeah.
That was the very topic that motivated me to start making videos, all the way back to my stop using shonen as a genre video, just to try and like take down that elitism.
Yeah. That's
Not
kind of.
nec- I mean, there's definitely shonen elitism too. Don't get me wrong, but it is much more abundant, I think, amongst the seinen community, we might say.
Yeah,
There's
because
like this sense of superiority over the younger demographic.
first of all, yeah, because it's seinen is the mature demographic, but also because I feel like for the most part, a lot of these seinen manga are what is considered by the standards as well written compared to a lot of these shonen. So you kind of feel like better for reading those. Even though it's, I feel like a lot of people think that seinen isn't mainstream when it 100% is. Like titles, at least titles like Monster and Berserk and Pun Pun, like everyone knows. I think Pun Pun is, I tend to call it this. I never fact checked, but I think Pun Pun is the most famous manga without a manga adaptation, because I can't think of any other that is as big as Pun Pun without a single adaptation.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to steal the thunder from that video too much, but I just want to make one more comment on this because I feel so passionately about this. I feel like the majority of the people that hold that seinen just are better than shonen, which, by the way, again, another problem with that formulation. It just is better. It's like, it's a fact. Seinen just is better. I hate that. That's also why I'm so pedantic on objective, subjective. But that aside, the people that advance the fact that seinen is better than shonen have only read like the top 3% of like the really good seinen. Let's be honest here. 95% of seinen is unhinged, unchecked garbage. Like all the Guro garbage. Like there's so much stuff that just nobody talks about because it's so irrelevant, it's so garbage, it's so sloppily put together. Like sure, it's exciting, it's violent, there's nudity, it's so off, it's so unhinged. But like it's just edgy for the sake of being edgy. Like it's, I don't know where this whole idea that mature equals better, but I mean, sure, yeah, some boobs and stabbing someone's more mature than the power of friendship, but sometimes it's the latter.
Because I would argue, because that's kind of like a thing that I would argue, because I've realized a lot of the things that I thought were mature when I was a teen weren't. Were just things that I wanted to be mature. Like again, like sex and violence. I mean, sex is mature, but the way that it's represented in most anime and manga is made for horny teens.
Yeah.
And the gore as well, kind of. Not for horny, but for edgy teens. And, I'm rereading actually Gantz right now. And Gantz is just boobs and violence and sex, and I love it. I don't care, I love it. But that's fine. But it's not, I don't like Gantz because it is mature. Let me just say that.
I'm excited for that video. Yeah.
Hopefully, I think it was going to be before this one, or if this one is easier to edit, maybe I'll drop this one first.
Yeah.
We'll see. But yeah, I'm not sure if we have much more to say. Just to recap a little bit, don't argue things like they were facts. Don't use the word mid or overrated. I do want to tackle that, because those words, like for example, you mentioned on your last video overrated and underrated, how you'd like to use for those words to be used as a starting point to a discussion. I feel like the problem with these words is that we kind of have removed the meaning of a lot of them. Like overrated doesn't mean overrated for most of the community. Overrated means bad. And underrated kind of means underrated for the most part. I think underrated is a word that people tend to use more or less. I mean, I've seen people saying that JoJo is underrated, which it's another argument.
Yeah.
But
I still think that, again, like as a starting point, they're excellent because you can clearly see where somebody's situated relative to just the general consensus on an anime. But it's problematic when that's your conclusion and not your beginning point, and that's the problem. Likewise with good writing, I feel like it's probably fine as a starting point, to say I think it's well written. Now let's explore that. But to say that as your conclusion, it's a little empty, and I think that's where I think that's where problems arise.
Actually, I think that's the biggest problem with the way that people criticize manga nowadays is that they start with the conclusion.
Yeah,
they don't start. Like it's thing is bad. I'm out.
Yeah, it's like I said my piece. It's a 7. We're out.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay.
And then you either agree or you say that no, it's good, or thing B is better than thing A actually.
Yeah, and then
ratio.
they reply ratio.
Yeah.
That was perfect. Can't believe you just tried to ratio me in real life.
I am addicted to Twitter, but I really, really hate it so much.
I actually think that TikTok might be better now. I left TikTok for Twitter. I want to go back. At least on Twitter, there are like people that have like these whole ass like almost like video essays, but it's just a bunch of screenshots from their notes. And you have to like pause each one really quickly to like read their analysis, and like it's kind of annoying. But like stuff like that, I think is slightly better than what we have on Twitter right now. Twitter's in fucking shambles right now. I gotta say it, but
I mean, there are people that do the analysis threads and things like that. They tend to be good. I mean, and this isn't insulting every single person on Twitter, because we are on Twitter very often. I wouldn't insult myself, but there's a lot of like really cool people that I interact with. So if you are on Twitter and you interact with me, I'm not trashing you. Maybe
I am.
Yeah, he is. So yeah,
aim your hate at me.
But yeah, I feel like that's the conclusion we have here.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Give your arguments, not just your conclusion.
Exactly. And so yeah, if you want more of this discourse, again, check Doofy's channel. My name is Doofy. Links will be on the description. He has a bunch of videos kind of on the topic. Has a bunch of videos on other topics as well. And we again have a 4-hour collaboration. Almost 4 hours. Or is it? No, I think it's 3 hours. I think we recorded 4, but the videos are 3.
Yeah, I was able to do some magic work on that collab, but we did indeed have the famous 4-hour Seinen tier list.
Yeah.
So if you want more of this, I urge you to check that out.
If you want us to actually trash a bunch of Seinen, it's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And praise Inyo Asano. That's the video.
Inyo Asano and Urasawa, I think, were the 2 ones that we put it high. And then everything else, yeah.
Yeah, it's not Dead Demons, then it's out.
Yeah. Well, and I'm gonna put a video on the left and a video on the right, because I always do. Maybe I'll put a video of mine here. I think I'm gonna put the masterpieces are overrated, where I actually talk about the standards and how people tend to dismiss a lot of the manga that are not monster, essentially.
Oh yeah, that's an excellent video. Yeah, you nailed it.
Thank you. And on your side, I'm gonna put the video of yours if I can. If I can't, I'm just gonna put something mine. Fuck you.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So if you watch it till here, thank you very much. And I'll see you next video.
Peace and love.